And here's what the whole controversy is all about. The row is over unlawful payment of 1.6 billion rand in fees to global consulting firm McKinsey-Trillion. And the G9 forensic probe commissioned by Eskom found that Trillian claimed it was McKinsey's Black Empowerment Supplier Development Partner. And this goes against the Eskom supplier database, which registered Trillian as a white-owned company when the contracts were awarded. Eskom found that Trillian was paid on a fraudulent basis, and at the time payment was claimed and made, Trillian had no black ownership. Payments were found to be invalid in the absence of a valid contract approved by Treasury. And Eskom then sought repayment of 1 billion rand from McKinsey and 564 million rand from Trillian. McKinsey says it has set aside just over 1 billion rand as it seeks a court review of the contract's legality. And recent legal opinion sought by Eskom from advocate Makabs Motimele says Trillian payments were justified. Joining us in studio, Edward Midole, political analyst. Thanks so much for your time. Let's get, of course, it's now obviously ventilated and brought up the sand, so to speak, of the whole Gupta-linked McKinsey and Trillian companies. In your view, if the investigation now or the seizing of assets is directed at McKinsey and Trillian, where does the link then fit in terms of what role or the Guptas may or may not have played?
From what is coming out from the media, it appears that the only link that is immediately available is where the company won the contract based on the BEE because they had to find a local company in South Africa which could partner with them in order to present the bid, in order to present the tender. So they won the business based on the BEE rating. So that's the only link so far. But we cannot then say that Trillian is a Gupta company. The only link that is there is where the company is winning business because of their BEE rating.
Okay, because I'm trying to clarify what we heard from the Hawks is that there isn't an imminent arrest or warrant sent out for any of the Gupta brothers, but we hear more and more that there is empirical evidence that indeed they had a hand in it, influenced the tender process, and irregular activity or even criminal activity for that matter.
What I do not seem to understand is why the agency for obtaining warrant of arrest on the Guptas, because now it seems that people have lost focus. We are focusing on the Guptas instead of focusing on the issue at hand. The issue is why the AFU has obtained an order, and served the order on the two companies to seize the assets of the two companies, McKinsey and Trillian. There is no Guptas there. So I think we need to be clear on what is the agent matter here. It's not the arrest of the Guptas.
No, but just to come back to the NPA saying that this was done in consideration of the input from various role players, civic organization, opposition parties. We know that there is a whole slew of criminal cases, around the Gupta family and their business associations. So speak to me about the legality. Yes, you can seize the personal assets of somebody that is considered or alleged to be implicated in money laundering or any other fraudulent activities, and the requirements thereof are not as such as in a criminal case. In other words, if there's sufficient suspicion or there is nuanced suspicion, as we've seen with the state of capture, their media reports, etc., that the NPA is indeed acting within the ambit of its act, or law rather.
Of course, the NPA is acting within the ambit of its law. But then the question is, the Section 38 of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act has not been passed today. It has always been there. There are several allegations which have been presented to the public of flouting the law, of criminal activities happening within South Africa, they haven't been so aggressively pursued. Civil society, whose interest, whose agenda is civil society serving in South Africa? The South African Federation of Trade Unions, whose agenda is it serving? Because they're the ones who have been pushing the FU to make sure that this order passes. Who are they serving? Because civil society, we know, it serves the interests of white monopoly capital. The ruling class in South Africa today is not the ANC. The ruling class is white monopoly capital, and they have got the civil society, they have got the media, they have got the state, they have got all these arms of government serving the white monopoly capital, who are the ruling elites. So we should. Are you
saying that you're questioning the independence of the NPA, that they could have been influenced by public pressure and what's in the public discourse in terms of the media, that they are acting so that they are seen to be acting and not necessarily based on evidence?
Exactly. It's not in the conviction of the NPA to prioritize the pursuing of the Trillian and McKinsey companies. There are so many urgent matters that need to be pursued aggressively. We have had, you must remember, Cindy, we have had Stinoff recently, where billions of our pension money disappeared through illicit activities. There was no civil society pushing or pressuring the NPA to pursue these companies which have been involved in Stinoff. So now we are surprised because all the attention now is on Trillian because of this alleged association with the Guptas. So we are punishing these companies because of their association with the Guptas, because now the media in South Africa is serving the agenda of continuously pursuing the Guptas. You must remember that this order was obtained in December, not January. It was obtained on the 14th of December. The reason why it was suspended is because they were afraid that it would be hauled out or it would be drowned out by the festivities of December, so people would not get to hear the narrative of pursuing the Guptas.
All right, let's get a view from Professor Bere Hanyane. He's a professor with the University of the Northwest and a political analyst. Good evening to you, Professor Hanyane, and thanks so much for your time. Do you think that the timing was indeed to ensure that it stings when everybody has their eyes are focused on the beginning of the new year, the festivities are over? Why hold off on the preservation order if it was issued in December 14th and exactly a month later it's enacted on?
Good evening, Cindy. Good evening to your panelists. Good evening to your viewers. Look, I think this question should best be directed at the NPA as to are they themselves under some measure of political influence or not, or it was a matter of a technicality on their part to make sure that indeed there is sufficient evidence to go for Trillian and McKinsey in this instance. The media has reported today that it points to that direction, that enough time was needed, a certain body of evidence needed to be gathered together. For me, the timing, it's not an issue. What is critical here is basically to make sure that justice is served for once those who have been accused of being on the wrong side of the law are given a measure of treatment, a measure of platform to state their case. Trillian, we heard last year that they were willing to pay back the money that supposedly were paid for their consultancy work that they've done. Indeed, this could be perceived in the public eye as a measure of admission of guilt. So here we are, seated in a broader scheme of things, that indeed state capture may very well be alive out there.
All right, let's get a response from our panelists. Edward, you seem to disagree with Professor Hanyane. And I want to extend on to that particular question, whether there is merit in the linking of the Gupta brothers, Kingsley and Trillian, in light of the Hawk saying there is absolutely no truth to a warrant of arrest being issued. In fact, it's a very sensitive investigation. They claim that this could potentially derail their processes if the speculative nature of this case perpetuates.
There is this annoying narrative that continues to be perpetuated, because I do not agree with Professor Banyani. I mean, pursuing criminals, if we are really serious about pursuing criminals, then we should have started with those that continue to flout the law in South Africa. We have companies that have blatantly flouted the law. We haven't obtained any warrant of arrest for them over the years. State capture, there are only 3 companies that are on the fore in terms of state capture. And Professor Banyani says, you know, these two companies are the face of state capture in South Africa. That's laughable. I mean, Transnet, SAA, Eskom, and Denel, you know, they are being accused of being the face of state capture in South Africa because they have failed to get control of these companies. Because these 4 companies stand for transformation, and that's where state capture is. They are not telling us about the state capture that is happening there, massive state capture.
All right, Professor Hanyani, we'll give you the chance to respond. Udo Kuza is an independent political analyst. We also have Botsang Muilwa in studio, who is a political analyst. Good evening to you, and thanks for joining us. Udo, is this putting the horse before the cart, in the sense that the asset forfeiture happens and the investigation later? What do you make out of it?
Well, we have a history of this. South Africa certainly has a history of this kind of fraud and theft. It's going back to the 1960s, early 1960s, where Dr. Hendrik French-Verwoerd had the insurance companies investigated and was going to table that in Parliament. He was then killed by some Greek guy called Safendas, who was declared mad. Then we had the information scandal, which took out hundreds of billions of rand during the apartheid regime, which was laundered by something like 12 to 20 different European banks. So there's a lot of fronting going on, and there's a lot of theft going on. There's the book by Barry Sargent, 10 Fateful Days in a 26 billion rand fraud, which implicates, or which reveals very good banks such as KPMG and Alan Gray, who are part of that. According to the late Barry Sargent, there's the onslaught onto the rand currency value.
Yeah, Udo, I don't want to make it too wide. I just want to understand, is there merit in linking the Gupta brothers to this particular case and the preservation order against McKinsey and Trillian?
Is there merit? I don't know, because I think one has to trust the NPA here. I don't think there would be merit in linking the Guptas unless there's really concrete, hardcore evidence. And so far, no evidence of such has ever come up. And the Guptas have been linked to the first family, the Zuma family. They've been linked to everything that is, per se, that is not acceptable for the ANC, in order to isolate the president and his family. So I think there is definitely no merit in it.
Okay, Botsang, your view?
Well, good evening, Cindy, and fellow panelists and the viewers. You know, I don't know why are we as a nation excited about papers being served on a company that is suspected to have had an illegal, you know, if I may put it that way, a transactional value. Why do we link it to state capture? We cannot sit here and discuss that one company that has been said to have benefited and acquired assets. Remember, I looked at the statement from the Hawks and the NPA, and he's talking about a company that has to prove how they acquired their assets. That is the main source of investigation. And they've got 90 days to do that in terms of the law. Now, if they can stand up and prove to the state within 90 days how they acquired the assets that they have, then the onus is resting with them. Then why do we link them to state capture? We know very well that there's been a narrative, there's been talks in the media, there's been excitement in the country that every company that is linked to the Guptas, it is responsible for state capture. Now, you talk of one company that has minor, as Business Day has said, minor contracts or minor monies contracts with Eskom, and we want to call that a state capture. I don't want to get into that form of discussion. We are reducing ourselves to actually what I term absolute nonsense. But what we should look at is what they are being accused of. They've got time to respond to that. Like any other company, it may happen in the country. They've got time, and as Professor Barry Haranyane said, They have done, fortunately, and for the first time in the history of these allegations against the Guptas and their own companies, somebody has been served papers. And I don't want to get into it, why it took 1 month. You know, the NPA can say they were investigating, they wanted to tighten their case, whatever reason. But now they have an opportunity to stand up and go to court or to the NPA or to the Hawks and present their own papers and their own response. And that is a good thing. But what we should be wary about as a nation is we cannot have national laws that are being applied to certain companies and other companies are being led to go away with such cases of corruption and collusion and so forth. And we can mention a number of examples. I mean, in this country, we are sitting with 4 major banks which were found, not alleged, found to have been corrupt, guilty of conniving for devaluing the currency of the country. Where are the Hawks and West NPA? Nothing has happened. We've got several cases reported, not by newspapers, but by the Competition Commission of companies which have colluded, which have been corrupt. They've never been prosecuted. But this is an opportunity for McKinsey or Trillian or whoever to present their case in front of a court of law and let the nature take its own course. But anybody who is going to stand up and think this is part of state capture, I'm sorry to say that, but that person is naive on what is a state capture, is because you cannot have one contract talking of state capture when the state has to be kept out from top to bottom.
Mr. Machole, I mean, this was also from a City Press report that was then republished on various platforms, that there is imminent arrest of the Gupta family. The Hawks denied it, and so is the Gupta family. What's the purpose then? What is the objective of that kind of narrative if the authorities themselves will rebut this particular claim?
It's the obligation of those who control the minds of the people to continue to feed and nourish the narrative. So we must not be surprised, Cindy, because the moment they stop feeding the narrative, then the truth will come out. Because, I mean, these people control the media. NASPAS, you must understand that they control the media, they control publishing, they control the newspapers. So they control the narrative. They don't only control the narrative, but they own the narrative. So it is within their responsibility, within their ambit, to continue to nourish and sustain the narrative. So in this case, the narrative about associating these two companies, especially Trillian, to the Guptas, serves to heighten and to provide that, you call it hype, to the narrative of pursuing the Guptas and presenting the Guptas as the face of corruption and state capture in South Africa. Remember, they are speaking about a contract. They are saying that McKinsey has to return the money to Eskom because there was no valid contract. Remember that under Pravin Gordhan, the FAC director, was serving without any contract. Michel, it was found that he was serving without contract, and he was even rewarded with performance bonuses. A lot of millions of South African taxpayers' money going to someone who has been serving.
So you're saying there's a selective application of the law?
Exactly.
That's exactly what I was saying, Cindy, to say. There was an investigation carried out by NN7, and it was found to be true, of audit findings, official audit findings regarding activities at the Treasury itself, where companies were performing duties without a valid contract. He made one example, and nothing has happened to them. But we don't say when a wrong has been done, then we leave other wrongs as a nation not to be attended to. That's not what we are saying. All that we are saying is that the laws are being applied, you know, unequally in this nation, and the repercussions are going to be one day somebody will stand up and use some of the cases or incidents that has happened in government as a source of reference to say, I have conducted this business with Eskom and nothing was said about me, therefore I'm conducting it now with Transnet, so why is it an issue a president has been said? And that's the nature of, you know, a risk we are facing as a nation, to say our laws are not applied properly. But also going back to an issue of why is it so much noise about this? Why is the media or the white-owned media, and we must be very clear, it's a white-owned media, we must not shy from saying that, is so making noise about it? It's because the company Trillian is linked to the Guptas. And when they print it, We were sitting here and waiting for one of the Gupta brothers to be arrested. And the works has come out. Official government statements have been issued to say, but these things are lies. This is not true, and this is not what we are investigating. But our people, they still believe that. So it is the duty of us as analysts and of black people in this country to stand up and actually interpret and tell the people of this country what is the truth and what is happening.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, we know that the preservation order could be a precursor to charges, depending on the investigation, but that in itself could have been done differently. But we're none the wiser, Professor Hanyane, as you said, we're not intricately involved in the state security or even the security cluster. But what one would think is that if you have enough evidence that would then compel you to seize assets and then possibly sit with egg on your face because these things are explainable when the companies come back in 90 days, hypothetically speaking, and they have the receipts and all sorts of other evidence. It's a risk that the NPA is taking here, or are you saying that they're confident enough that they have a winnable case?
Cindy, look, I think there is confidence on their part. For the first time, I suppose, in the eyes of the public, that indeed they may have evidence to the contrary of what has been said in the studio there. What is exciting for me, and I say Butang doesn't like the word to be used in relation to this instance, but be that as it may, what is exciting for me is that you have platforms created once and for all to deal with these issues, be it the commission that is pending in terms of establishment, and in terms of references under the Deputy Chief Justice, Justice Zondo, or be it what is happening in Parliament through the parliamentary inquiry, one way or another, the truth shall be established. It doesn't help to be speculative on an issue that may very well reveal things that we never knew existed. And I don't want to play the conspiracy theory politics here. Rather be rational. Look at the facts. And by and large, I want to sympathize with the position that, quite rightly, state capture must be broadened. I agree with that. But what is the evidence currently that we're seated on that needs attention? And this is what is unfolding in the eyes of the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think that process is organically happening anyway, in that we're going with the state capture in the format of the state of capture report. By default, even when the terms of reference haven't yet been published. I want to go to Udo very briefly, Udo, in your view, that as law agencies and how there is the temptation of being influenced by, be it public pressure or even political interference, we cannot downplay that particular ability of even weakening or flouting processes going forward. Would this, in your view, be a case of such possible influence?
The possible influence you're talking about, the lobby groups, the lobbyists, the economic hitmen, are there, and they're very powerful, and they have a lot of financial backing behind them. It is to this very day that the minority shareholders of 3 of South Africa's mining houses, amongst them JCI, being part of it, trying to get the money back from Investec Bank and the head of Investec Bank, Stephen Koseff. To this day, they're battling with them, and they can't get anywhere. The laws are not structured well enough of this country. The laws need to be readdressed, need to be rewritten and put together so that the public out there feel confident with the banks, feel confident with the financial institutions, and feel confident that these kinds of cases will not recur and recur and recur and recur. We've fallen from KPMG to Steinhoff to this one now, one after another. It never ends. What is going on?
Okay, well, that's all the time we have, gentlemen. I'm afraid we're going to have to pick it up some other time. I'm Tsang Moelwa, political analyst, and we have Edward Mitilo, political analyst. Berry Hanyane, he's a professor with the Northwest University, joining us on the phone line. Udo Fhuza, independent political analyst. Thanks for joining us. We take a quick break. We'll see you shortly.